The road to Hollow Bridge was barely visible under the thick, swirling fog. Erin tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her heart pounding as her headlights barely pierced the grey mist ahead. The old bridge, notorious for its ghostly legend, loomed just beyond the tree line, shrouded in an eerie silence. "This place gives me the creeps," Jake muttered from the passenger seat. "Are we really doing this?" "We have to," Erin said, her voice steady but her hands trembling. The story is too good to pass up. As journalism students, they had spent weeks researching the infamous bridge curse, a tale dating back decades. According to local legend, a woman in a white dress had been seen walking the bridge at midnight, her face obscured by a veil. Those who encountered her never made it across. Their goal was simple: capture proof of the ghost and debunk the myth. In the back seat, Carla checked her camera while Nate scanned the map. "The bridge isn't far," Nate murmured. "We walk the rest of the way from here." They parked near the overgrown trail leading to Hollow Bridge, stepping into the cold mist that clung to their skin. The deeper they went, the heavier the fog became, as if it was swallowing them whole. Then, the first set of footsteps echoed. Not theirs. Someone, was walking just ahead. And it was waiting for them. The group froze. The distant footsteps echoed through the mist, slow and deliberate. Nate swallowed hard. "Did you hear that?" Carla clutched her camera, trying to steady her breathing. "Maybe it's just a second set of footsteps. Closer." "Nope. That's not the wind," Jake muttered, gripping the flashlight tighter. Erin forced herself to move forward. "We came here to investigate, right? Let's keep going." The fog thickened as they approached Hollow Bridge. The old wooden planks creaked under their weight, as if whispering secrets long buried. The bridge stretched into the darkness, disappearing into the mist. Carla raised her camera and hit record. "All right, we're standing on Hollow Bridge, the site of the infamous bridge curse. Locals say that anyone who sees the woman in white..." Tap, tap. A sound came from the far end of the bridge. A slow, rhythmic tapping, like heels clicking against the wooden surface. The group exchanged nervous glances. Nate took a hesitant step forward. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, from within the fog, a shadowy figure emerged. Tall. Still. Watching. A gust of wind lifted the mist just enough for them to see a white dress. Carla gasped, her hands shaking as she zoomed in. "Oh my God. Is that..." The figure lifted a hand. The veil covering its face began to shift. Then, it ran toward them. Screams filled the night. The group turned to run, but their feet felt sluggish, as if the air itself resisted their movement. The sound of rushing footsteps pounded behind them, closer with every breath. Nate risked a glance back. The woman in white was sprinting toward them, her veil fluttering like torn silk. But what made his stomach lurch? Her feet never touched the ground. "Move. Move." Jake shoved Erin forward, snapping her out of her trance. They bolted off the bridge, panting, slipping on the damp ground. The footsteps behind them stopped. Carla gasped, clutching her camera. Where did she go? They spun around. The bridge was empty. The mist swirled, undisturbed, as if the last 30 seconds had never happened. "Did we imagine that?" Erin whispered, her voice trembling. Jake shook his head, wiping sweat from his brow. "No. We all saw her." Carla played back her footage. The screen flickered with static. She fast-forwarded. Nothing. The woman in white had vanished from the recording. "That's impossible," she muttered, tapping the screen. Nate was still catching his breath when he noticed something. Footprints. Not theirs. Faint, wet imprints of bare feet trailed from the bridge, leading past them, straight toward the abandoned town. A chill settled over them. "She's not done with us," Erin whispered. And then, from somewhere in the fog, they heard it again tap. Tap. Coming closer. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps echoed through the fog. Tap. Tap. Closer. Jake swallowed hard, gripping Erin's arm. "She's coming." They backed away, eyes darting around. The bridge was behind them, but ahead, the abandoned town loomed, barely visible through the swirling mist. "Where do we go?" Carla whispered, clutching her camera. Nate pointed. "There. That building." A crumbling. They stumbled off the bridge, fog swallowing their footprints as they entered the ghostly remains of Hollow Peak. The buildings loomed, their windows dark and lifeless. Yet, something about them felt aware. Carla's camera flickered. "My battery's draining fast." Erin shivered. This place shouldn't exist. It wasn't on the map. Jake pointed ahead. "That church. Let's hide there." As they ran, the footsteps followed, slow, steady, unrelenting. The air thickened with whispers, a name carried in the wind. "One of you belongs to me." The church doors groaned as they pushed inside. Dust choked the air, and the scent of rotting wood clung to the walls. Stained glass windows, once vibrant, were now cracked and lifeless. Their footsteps echoed as they moved toward the altar. Carla gasped. "Look." A faded newspaper lay on the pulpit, its headline barely legible. Hollow Peak Tragedy, 1953. Bridge collapse claims 13 lives. Jake frowned. 13. Erin's voice trembled. "We're 13. A sudden gust slammed the doors shut. The air grew heavy as a shadow stretched across the walls. "One must stay," a voice rasped. "To pay the debt." The voice slithered through the air, cold and hollow. The stained glass windows flickered as if the church itself had come alive. The words on the newspaper shifted, ink bleeding across the page. "One must stay. One must pay." Carla backed away from the pulpit. This isn't real." Jake grabbed the paper, his hands trembling. 1953. The bridge collapse. 13 dead. He looked up at the group. But there were only 12 bodies found. A gust of wind howled through the rafters. The church doors rattled violently, locked tight. The pews creaked as if unseen figures sat among them. "The last soul never crossed," the voice whispered. "And now, one of you must take its place." The candles on the altar flared to life, their flames twisting into ghostly shapes. Shadows gathered in the corners, stretching toward them. Then, the church bells rang, once, twice, 13 times. The final toll of the bell echoed, shaking the church to its foundation. The shadows slithered along the floor, reaching out like skeletal fingers. Carla's breath hitched. "We need to get out of here. Now." Jake gripped the pew, his face pale. "It won't let us. Not until one of us takes its place." The newspaper in his hand crumbled into dust. Beneath it, a single name was scratched into the wood of the pew. Carla Rhodes. Her heart pounded. No, that's not possible. A violent wind ripped through the church, and the stained glass windows shattered. The figures in the shadows grew clearer, pale, drowned faces, their hollow eyes locked onto Carla. "The bridge toll must be paid," the voice hissed. Jake lunged for Carla, but an invisible force yanked her backward. The wooden floor beneath her splintered, opening into a gaping abyss. The spirits wailed, reaching for her, their mouths open in silent screams. The last missing soul had been chosen. Carla's screams were swallowed by the howling wind as she was dragged toward the abyss. Jake lunged, grabbing her wrist just in time. His grip was firm, but the force pulling her was stronger. The bridge toll must be paid, the voices chanted in unison, growing louder. Carla's feet dangled over the dark void. The faces in the shadows contorted, desperate, hungry. They had waited too long for their final offering. Jake gritted his teeth, pulling with everything he had. "I won't let them take you." But the moment he spoke, something changed. The force lessened. The shadows hesitated. Carla gasped. What if it's not about sacrifice? The spirits loomed over them, their eyes burning with the same eerie glow as the bridge lanterns. Jake's mind raced. The legend always spoke of a toll, but never what it was. Maybe it's not about dying, but about remembering. Carla's eyes widened. They don't want blood. They want justice. She turned to the spirits. You were wronged. Forgotten. That's why you're here, isn't it? The wind died down. The shadows wavered. Carla took a deep breath. We remember you. We know what happened. The spirits let out a collective sigh, a whisper of relief. One by one, their forms began to dissolve, their suffering finally acknowledged. The abyss beneath Carla's feet sealed shut. The walls of the church steadied. And then, the final toll of the bridge bell rang out, soft, distant, before fading into silence. The silence after the final toll was deafening. Carla collapsed onto the bridge, gasping for breath. Jake held onto her, his hands shaking. The once twisting shadows had vanished, leaving behind only the faint glow of the bridge lanterns. Did we do it? Carla whispered. Jake looked around. The bridge was no longer shifting. The abyss had sealed, and the fog was beginning to lift, revealing the distant shoreline. The curse, it's broken, Jake said, barely believing it himself. The spirits had wanted justice, not another sacrifice. They had been waiting for someone to acknowledge their suffering, to remember their names. And in doing so, Carla and Jake had set them free. But something still felt unfinished. Carla stood, her legs trembling. She turned back toward the bridge's entrance. The old toll booth, which had been empty before, now had a faint glow inside. She stepped closer, peering through the cracked glass. Inside sat a single, dusty ledger. Pages flipped on their own, revealing the names of the forgotten souls who had perished here. One by one, the names began to fade. Jake swallowed hard. Their debt is finally paid. The bridge let out a low groan, almost as if exhaling after centuries of torment. The wooden planks beneath their feet solidified. The fog fully lifted, revealing the road ahead, leading safely to the other side. Carla exhaled. Let's go home. They stepped forward, crossing the bridge for the final time. As they reached the other side, the wind carried a whisper, soft, almost grateful. Then, the bridge behind them disappeared into the fog. Gone, as if it had never been there at all.